Thank you very much for inviting me coming here. Having been among young people, you feel 10 years younger now than 3 weeks ago. So it's a fantastic privilege to be able to meet all these ambitious students, and they want to make it a difference, not only in their own life, but also for South Africa. This is a great inspiration source for me. So, of course, now we will look at some of the very difficult issues, how to price water and how to value water. Can it be free for all, and how should we afford to do that? I'm going to talk about water as a human right. I'll talk about the aspects of the water economy and also how we could develop the water systems. Now, if you look at the economy literature, you think that if the cost is increasing, then the consumption will go down. That's what the economists tell us. Now, I looked at the 104 different cities in the world, how they charge the first 200 cubic meters of water. And here's the result. There is no relationship between consumption and cost. And of course, then we have to think about it. Does that have to do with the GDP from that country or not? Is it difference in poor countries and in rich countries? No, there is no difference. There is no relationship between cost and consumption. So this tells something about water pricing and the way we value water. Now, in Sweden, we have a different way of pricing water. On the vertical axis, you see the price in euros, and then the cost for the volume. And as you can see, the fixed cost, just the cost to connect to the distribution network, is fixed from the very beginning, maybe 70, 80, 90% of the total water cost for a year. So there is no incentive to save water in a Swedish system because we are spoiled, we have a lot of clean water, but there is no incentive from the pricing. Now, just to give you some examples of what it looks like, for example, Copenhagen, having relatively much water available in Denmark, is much more expensive than Las Vegas in the middle of the desert in Nevada. And there is no relation between water scarcity and water price. Also looking at the price in different European countries, admittedly, this statistics is old now. I got it from a European Environmental Agency recently. And still you can see between Italy, about 50 euros for the first 100 cubic meters, compared to Germany and the Netherlands, 350. And even if these numbers are bigger now, there's still a big difference between the cheapest and the most expensive. And notice that Italy, they have a very low price despite water scarcity in Italy, while Germany, Netherlands or Denmark have relatively good water capacity. If you look at another aspect, which is the cost recovery, and the left column here is about the water supply and the right column is about sewage treatment. In England, Scotland, the Netherlands, you see about 100% cost recovery. In France, it's more than 100%. Most of the water sewage treatment is in private companies there, while in Germany, it's about 100% again. While in Spain, you see the cost recovery is not 100%, far from it. So the systems look quite different within Europe. So I think we have to start with what is the value of the water, giving the right value to different water sources and their applications. So what does that mean in practice? What can we think about as terms of water value and water supply? Well, if my life depends on getting water, I'm willing to pay with all my diamonds and all my gold, right? So the last liters are so valuable for us. And this is the dilemma, economic dilemma, that Adam Smith already formulated in the 1700s. How come that diamonds that we can live without are so costly compared to water that our life depends on? And it took actually 100 years for the economists to give a good answer to this question. And it all has to do with the marginal cost of water. If you have a lot of water, you first, let's say 100 liters of water, you first make some reservation. What do I need in order to survive? To cook, to wash the dishes maybe, and wash my clothes and so on. And maybe if there's something left, I can think about washing the car, right? But if you shrink this to 50 liters available, you don't decrease the amount of water that you need to survive. You may decrease the water that you use for the car washing, right? And in this way, you can value the water in a different way. So we know that every individual should have the right to have access to sufficient food and water. And of course, here in South Africa, it's written in the Constitution, and it's fantastic. But it's not a human right to waste the water. It's not a human right to grow food in the wrong way, or wash your car in the desert, or having a swimming pool. If you do that, you should pay for it. So in other words, human right could be quite different depending on if my life depends on it or if it doesn't. So if you look at now, here is the model I stood up first. The first liters, they are so valuable because your life depends on it. Next, we have to cook, we have to wash, and out here we might water the garden or wash the car or something like that. And the strange thing is that the pricing should be exactly the opposite. And this is opposite all economic theory. But this is the way you price water also in South Africa. And I'm so happy to see that the first liters of water, they should be free. And this, for example, you can see the red line here is representing Durban. And you can also see other cities in Africa are applying the same methodology. And of course, this goes back to Adam Smith, if you didn't know that. While in Sweden, as I showed, we have a completely different way of pricing the water that does not encourage us to save any water. Now, look at the aspects now of water economy. What kind of arguments can we have now? First of all, water scarcity is not a problem only for the utility. It's our problem, we as users. And our lifestyle, our traditional use of water, how long we take a shower, how much we use warm water and cold water, what kind of food we eat, and so on, all of that will influence the water scarcity. But we seldom talk about our personal responsibility. We mostly talk about, well, I open the tap and the water should be there. And as long as I can open the tap, there is no water scarcity. Many people think like that. So I think we have to agree on three basic principles. And the first one is transparency. In other words, I as a customer has to understand why the cost is like this, why I cannot use more water, and so on. And when I get the bill, I should be able to understand why I got to pay this amount of money. And the next one is cost recovery. Somewhere we have to be able to pay for the water pumping, the water treatment, the distribution, the cleaning of the used water, and so on. Somewhere along the line we have to be able to pay for all of that. Should it be paid by tax money? Should we hide it in a black box? Or should we make it visible? And my personal theory is that we should make it as transparent as possible so we understand the value of the water. And then, of course, affordability. Everybody, every human being on this earth should be able to get the necessary water, clean water. So there we have the human right. And who should decide about who should get that free water? Well, of course, that has to be discussed in social and political circles. Now, water tariffs, are they reflecting the actual, or are they reactive to the consumption? Well, you saw on the very first picture, there is no relationship between consumption and price. And we see that we may ask ourselves, do we have what we call elasticity? In other words, is the water consumption reactive to water prices? And in most cases, there is no relation. And if you look and compare between different countries and different places in the world, there is no elasticity at all. In some cases, there is, but in very few cases. So, we said it's a human right to get the clean water at home. But we also, when we use the water, we pollute it. We use the water. And now, who should pay to clean up the water that I have been using so that my neighbor can use the clean water he or she has a right to? So in other words, we have really to consider the whole water cycle, not only to get the clean water, but also to replace it to the same quality as it had when I picked it up from the lake or the stream or the groundwater. So we have to really understand how cleaning and supply are related to each other. Now, that means we have the right to the clean water, but we also have to bring it back to the same quality as when before we received it. And who should pay for this? And all the time remembering that yes, everybody should be able to afford a minimum amount, but somewhere somebody has to pay for all of this pumping, treating and cleaning. So I think that we have to concentrate much more on the demand side, because at least in our European societies, we have been concentrated very much on the supply side. And this is true both for energy and for water. We all the time make sure that there is enough water so that we can consume, or enough energy so that we consume electrical energy, and so on. And now it's time to turn around and look, what can I do on the demand side? Because that's where we finally have to decide how much water is getting used. In our lifestyles, our traditions, our habits, our bad habits and so on, what can we do as individuals? And of course, we have to teach ourselves how to behave at home, how to take care of the water we have. And I myself, I've practiced, because we have had a little cottage in the middle of the wood. We have a well, and that well might very well get dry at the end of the Swedish summer. So how can I be careful about that water? And that's a very good lecture during the summer, so that I'm a little bit more prepared than I come back to the city and just open the tap and take it for granted that water is available. And we have to think about how we use the water and reuse it also at home. Maybe I can use the water after cooking to, at least when the water has cooled down, to water the flowers and things like that. All the time thinking of how can I, in my local scale, reuse the water. And that's why we need a water economy that takes this into consideration. Also, that our utilities should educate us, and we should be educated all the way from primary school and up, and even before that, to be very careful about our ways to use water. Now, if you look at the water economy, this is my view that first of all, it has to be transparent. We have to understand the rules. And I think the rules have to be determined not by the water company, but by some independent body that set up the rules that we can agree on. so that everybody can afford a sufficient amount, but all of us should contribute to make it possible to really cover the cost. And that means that the water industry now is actually a business that can use the value of water. And suddenly we can understand that the water is not only waste. The water contains a lot of good components that can be used. And I'll come back to that. And I think that the goal should be full cost recovery, because I think when I pay for the water, I would like to see how was my money getting used in order to improve the quality of the water, in order to avoid too many leakages, in order to maintain the pipe network, in order to upgrade the wastewater treatment processes, and so on and so on. And something else should pay for roads, hospitals, schools, and so on. Because if I pay to some just black hole, then I don't know how I can get motivated to save my water. So I think the long-term goal is not only to look at the water in the city, but also to look how did we actually use the ecosystems, natural assets and so on, in order to get our goal. If we pump groundwater that is going down, down, down for every year, this is not a situation that can last. To give you a couple of examples here, now the groundwater in the Central Valley in California is getting so low, so it's not longer sustainable. It's down to minus 140 meter, 150 meter, and the ground has now, over the last 3 or 4 decades, gone down about 15 meters. In Gujarat, in India, the groundwater level has gone down 300 meters in 30 years. And it's not a sustainable situation now to pump the groundwater from that low level. What makes it even more stressful is that the farmer has the energy subsidized. And we think that subsidies are good, and they are meant to be good, but they don't give any incentive to save. So in other words, the farmer doesn't lose, at least just not now, to pump it from 300 meters. But it also means that the ratio of the agricultural pumping of the total energy pumping in India is going up and up and up. And this is not a sustainable situation. So, how do we develop now the water systems? What can we do? What can be done from a South African perspective, and what can be done in other places? Well, I personally believe that high-income people to some extent have to support low-income people, not only in tax systems but also in water systems. Some people that cannot afford it should get the free water to some extent, and then the other group that can afford more water should pay sufficiently so that we have a full cost recovery. Then it's often the other way around. For example, in India, low-income people very often depend on street vendors to pay a high price for the water, and usually pay more for the water per liter than the high-income people with a pipe connection pays. So we have to find out a policy that makes it possible to have the right cost for the right people. Of course, we have to look at non-technological solutions here. New business models, new pricing that we can try, and also incentives. What kind of incentives do I get to save the water? What kind of incentives does the utility have to really deliver the kind of water that we need? What kind of incentives do we get in order to decrease the amount of leakages in our piping systems, and so on and so on? Also, we have a lot of new interesting technologies available today. Technologies that are available, for example, for desalination, membrane technology that can be used to reuse brackish water or grey water or something like that. We have technologies that allow us to have an online real-time information about the status of the water quality in different places. And there is a lot of interesting driving forces that can help us here to make the water better. For example, making the, let's say, poor water quality available as drinking water, or using the rainwater, and relatively small investments can be used for rainwater harvesting in our societies. We can have reuse and desalination, and desalination may be a very expensive solution for Johannesburg, but a more realistic solution for Durban or Port Elizabeth or Cape Town, close to the sea. And of course we should use renewable energy. And a good example of this is Perth in Western Australia, having 2 wind farms that supply the necessary energy for their desalination plants. And the good thing is that if you have an excess of energy from the wind farm, then you store your extra electrical energy in terms of more clean water available. So there is a lot to be done in using renewable energy and get our water. We know that desalination requires a lot of energy, but if we use that kind of renewable energy, it can be more defendable. So of course we should aim for the right water, for the right purpose, for the right user, for the right cost. In other words, don't flush the toilet with drinking water. We can flush the toilet with used water, grey water, rainwater, and so on. We can use the grey water for other purposes, irrigation in the garden, or irrigation in the parks, or using low quality water for cleaning the streets, and so on and so forth. In other words, we have to think about different sources of water can be used for different purposes, not just one quality for everything. And I think with that kind of thinking, we can use the water much more wisely and also can bring down the total cost. To measure is to know. Not until we know how much we use, we can appreciate the value of the water. And today there are, here in South Africa, available water meters where you have also an app connected to the water meter. So as a customer, I can look, well, today I used so much water. This week I get a graph how much water I used the last 7 days. And it's a strange increase one of the days. Is it a leakage? Is a toilet leaking? Or what's happening? Did I have a party, or what happened really? And in such a way we can learn how we could behave, and that kind of feedback from measurements I think is extremely important, and it's becoming affordable for more and more people. And not until we know how much we consume, we can appreciate much more. Also, this is something that can motivate the utility. Maybe the utility can subsidize part of these water meters. Why? Because if the utility can early enough detect a leakage, then they can save water by coming and fix the pipes or the toilet or whatever it is. So we know that it's really important to measure, because if you look at the European picture, if you don't measure, these households, they consume 1/3 more water than those who have some kind of measurement of the water consumption. So it influences our behavior. In Seattle, in the US, they started the information campaign that in your subdivision we are going to install water meters. And just by the rumors was enough for people to decrease the water consumption. So we are influenced by these measurements. Used water that contains a lot of valuable components, nutrients like phosphorus, that is a finite element. It contains metals, minerals, chemicals, energy, and all of that can be reused, it has a value, and it's not something that you just get rid of. So we have to combine technologies that can make use of these components, and also business models that really can show that it's valuable to really reuse the used water, not just get rid of it. So our goal should really be to educate ourselves about the true value of water. But also, I believe that we should aim at full cost recovery. Not until then we understand the value of water. At the same time, make it available for everybody with pricing mechanisms, business models, financing schemes, and also appreciating how we are influencing the ecosystem. So we need assessing the water pricing. We need really to have a good debate about the cost recovery and incentives from the customers, from the utilities, from the operators, from the managers, and so on. And also enable the water companies to invest in improved technology, in improved and innovative technologies. And at the same time, affordability for everybody. So, to conclude this, I believe strongly in transparency to avoid hiding away numbers that makes us not trust the system. The tariffs high enough to be able to cover the cost, but free for those in need. Volumetric rates measure so that we know, and also different water uses are treated on an equal footing. I should understand the rules. And then of course we may discuss, should we have regional variations or not, depending on water scarcity and water availability. So I think these problems can be solved also in a very water scarce area. It's a lot about right leadership, and I'm looking at some South African examples that are really great role models, but also from other countries in poor areas. One area, such area, is Phnom Penh in Cambodia, just to mention one very good example that will show that it's possible, it's not impossible. So, thank you very much for listening.
Stop.